Okay, and I will turn it over to Lindsay to start us off.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. So thanks for joining us today, everybody. This is like almost marks a full year of Symbiota support group, which is pretty exciting. So thanks for joining us. It's great. We have a really good turnout. Before we get started on the topic for today, we just have like a few quick announcements to make. So the first one is that I know that we're probably just still getting over like fall conferences, but thinking ahead to next year, in June, Katie and I are organizing a symposium at Spinach. This is going to be in San Francisco, and we're looking for people who are interested in potentially contributing to the symposium. So if you have any tools that you frequently use or digitization workflows that you'd really like to show off during the symposium, please email me or Katie, and we'll get back to you. There is potentially some support to help you if you want to travel to this conference and be there either virtually or in person. So please reach out if you have any ideas. You have until January to submit abstracts. So if this is something that might interest you, please definitely let us know. There is a little bit of time to think about it, but those deadlines are going to come up sooner than we, probably think right now. Also, so I think a couple months ago, we had our Symbiota support group on new citation tools in your portal. There's now new documentation related to that on Symbiota Docs. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. That might help, refresh everyone's memories on what we talked about in that Symbiota support group. The link to the video is also there, but it's also like written out step-by-step instructions about how to implement that. This is specifically documentation for collection managers. And then related to today, we have new documentation on identification keys in Symbiota Docs as well. So after the session today, if this is a topic that really interests you, we definitely recommend checking that out as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, if you haven't been to our website lately, you might want to check it out. We do post event registration, links to all of our resources on there. And then we have this new kind of like mini blog series called What's New, where we post quick updates about what the hub's been up to and like little quick snippets of information to help you, learn about new tools and updates to your portal. I think that's it for the announcements.
Great. Any announcements from anyone in the community? I've seen a lot of job postings going on in the NH call and their Herbaria listservs. So if you know of anyone looking for a job, let us know and we can probably forward you lots of collection managers and such.
I have heard that some people who applied for TCN funding have just been notified. So there's some new exciting projects coming out. I don't know. That's just I don't know who all that pertains to, but it looks like Brian McLean's, I think it was a mammal TCN was funded.
Oh, super exciting. I feel like we haven't had one of those in a while. Super cool.
I guess I would just like to say a couple things before we get started, which is that this whole thing is made possible by the Symbiota Support Hub, which was part of iDigBio's phase 3 funding. And Katie and Samantha and Greg and Lindsay are all part of the Symbiota Support Hub team. And our goals with these workshops are just to try to build capacity within the community so that everybody who's using Symbiota knows how to use it better and more efficiently and to sort of share resources across the whole community of Symbiota users. And so it really is for you. If there's topics that you want to see covered in these things, send all your curators and all your volunteers or all your students to these. It's appropriate that everybody come because we're just trying to take some of the burden of educating people on how to use the tool off of all of you and make it easy.
Thanks, Jen. With that, we'll go ahead and jump into the topic of the day. And then, of course, we have time for questions and such. We're excited to talk today about identification keys. These are a lesser known function of Symbiota portals, and they're not necessarily commonly used in a lot of portals because they require a lot of setup. But I'll be talking about what that looks like and how you can be involved with the setup of identification keys later on in the session. So first of all, I'm going to talk about where are identification keys and how do you set them up and edit them. Pretty simple and straightforward. And those are the same pages that you will see in the Symbiota docs too. And as I go, feel free to raise your Zoom hand and ask any questions you might have. If there's anything that was unclear or you want me to walk back through some steps, totally good. We can take questions at the end too, like if you have extensive questions. Okay, so let's talk about what identification keys are and where you can find them. So they are ways that you can narrow down what species you are looking at, say if you had a sample in front of you, based on options within a checklist. So identification keys are only found within checklists. You can't, and that can be dynamic checklists, or it can be pre-built checklists. So what that means is, I'm going to open up SciNet right here. So if you go into Flora projects, there are a bunch of checklists here, and this is common on a lot of portals where they have pre-built checklists based off of specific regions, or maybe people had specific projects set up, like teaching projects. But if you go to a list of checklists, if identification keys are activated in that portal, then you will probably see a key icon next to the name of that checklist. And so when you go into one of those checklists, as long as the key is activated, someone, when they build a checklist, can decide whether they want identification keys on or off. Then you have the ability to navigate to the identification key. And so if I click this key here, on the right side, you're going to see the ability to filter or display the taxa that match the character states that are listed here. So for example, this is a plant checklist. So I could look for anything that is a legume. I mean, that's kind of a taxonomic group, but you could also go trees. So it would give me a list of all the trees. It would, I want leaves, etc. And you can do multiple at the same time. So if I want opposite leaves that have entire margins, and so on and so forth. So you can narrow down your options based on what is in the checklist. An important thing to note is that the things that show up on the left side of this checklist page are only going to be things that were in the beginning checklist. I mean, it's somewhat intuitive because you open the checklist and then you're using an identification key within the checklist. But there's not necessarily a page where you can go and look at all of the taxa in the entire portal and then use an identification key on it. You could theoretically do that if you made a checklist of all taxa in the portal, but that's just, most of them are meant for narrowing down your options within a checklist already. So these checklists, or these identification keys, consist of taxon level characters and their character states. So I'm going to try to keep this terminology very consistent throughout this talk, because the characters is the type of trait. So for example, the longevity or the stature or the armature, that's what's known as a character. And then there are different states to that can be coded for a taxon. So in the character of armature, it can be unarmed or armed. So those are the two states that belong to the character. And I say taxon level because these are applied to all of the individuals of a taxon. These aren't the same thing as traits, where you can have a taxon that has, well, when you have a specimen that has, 3-inch long leaves versus 4-inch long leaves versus 6-inch long leaves. So we kind of keep traits separate from the language of characters and character states, because characters are based off of taxon averages or general character states, and then traits are based off of individuals. So just like I said, a character is a category of, oh, and now here I was improper with my terminology. Category of a trait, again, taxon level, and a state is a measurement or an assigned trait for that taxon. Okay, so some important caveats of using identification keys in Symbiota portals is that you must have identification keys turned on in your portal in order for them to show up. So if you don't see these little key icons in your portal, that probably just means that that functionality is not turned on. So that's something you would want to contact your portal administrator about if you wanted to start using keys. Second of all, ID keys must be populated before they are helpful for use. And this takes extensive research and curation. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, but obviously all these characters and character states need to come from somewhere. They're not auto imported from any sort of API at the moment. There are not preset character matrices that are loaded in with all of your data. So when a portal is created, these tables are empty. So they need to be completely filled out before they can be useful for your portal. And that often takes a lot of work. And this is where your communities can come into play, because they can help making these character and character state matrices. So also, identification keys in portals are generally more like field keys than dichotomous keys. So they tend to be not super specific in the language, just because they're not floras and they're not faunas. They're not made to look at, puberulent versus pubescent versus serrate versus ciliate. All of those type of technical words that you could technically put in there, but they're generally made for less technical users. So again, they're not just copies of dichotomous keys or floras. They're generally made to be general and easy to use. And then because identification keys are built from checklists, then the character matrix for the entire taxonomic thesaurus is unlikely to be complete. And this will make a little bit more sense later when I show you how to edit character matrices. But it's rarely the case that if someone has imported a character, that they have also scored the character state for every taxon in that taxonomic thesaurus, especially for something as big as SciNet, because it has thousands and thousands of taxa in it. So it could be that you have in your checklist a bunch of taxa that have never been scored according to a particular character or character state in your checklist. And so if you go into your checklist and you are looking for all the trees and you're like, wait, I know I had that one species in here and that's definitely a tree, and you go down and you look for it, you might just find that that was never scored as tree versus shrub versus liana versus vine. So there are some obvious missing data. So when you are creating a checklist and you are hoping to use the identification keys, then make sure that those character states have actually been scored for your taxa. Okay, so how are identification keys set up and how do I edit identification keys? This is hopefully where kind of the background is going to become a little bit more clear. So this is what it looks like, the character state matrix. And I'm just going to navigate throughout the SciNet portal because it's a little more obvious when you get into it. Okay, so again, I'm just going to start from the home page and go into the Flora projects and just pick a random identification key or a random checklist. And then if I want to go to the key, again, I click the little key icon. If I hover over it, it says open Symbiota key. And then I have my key over here on the side. So to Oops. Okay, so to edit a character, you must be what is called a identification key character administrator. So there are two levels of permissions. There's administrator and then there's editor. An administrator can create characters and create character states and all of the information related to those characters and character states. An editor can change what character states are applied to what taxa. So it's likely that you will only have a very few people who are administrators for your portal, because they're the ones who are actually setting up the definitions of the characters and character states. But then you might have a lot of identification key editors, because they might be able to, focus on their favorite taxon or their favorite character and apply that to apply a state to all the taxa of interest. So let me pull SciNet back up. So if I click on this edit character matrix here, this is what a identification keys editor can do. I'm looking at the matrix. I'm deciding which which character I want to edit. And let's say I want to edit habit. It will bring up the matrix associated with habit. And then I can look at all of the taxa within my checklist, and then all of the potential character states on the side. And then I can assign one or many character states to that taxon. So if you wanted to set this up for your checklist, so your identification key, then you would want to run through this and make sure that all of the taxa have a character state applied to them. So you might say, oh, I know that Ruellia is herbaceous. So I could click that. If you apply a character state to a parent taxon, so like a genus or a family, then it's going to automatically apply that same character state to all of the children taxa. So automatically, since all of Ruellia are herbaceous, you would also see Ruellia salatiflora when you do a search. And so you can do that for any number of your characters that are available. And as you can see, there are some major data gaps because apparently no one has counted or at least checked one of these character states for this particular character for these taxa. Okay, so that's how you would edit the identification keys character states that are assigned to taxa. You have to do it within a checklist, and then you open up the checklist matrix for a specific character, and then you assign the states to your taxa. If you already have a bunch of data already set up, you have a spreadsheet that has, here's all my taxa and here's all the traits or the character states. Can I please put these in not by one? We probably can work with you to import those if they're a large data set. It just requires going through the back end because there's no front end user interface quite yet. Okay, I'm going to pause here and ask if there are any questions. No questions yet?
I actually have one.
Great.
Oh, so when you demonstrated the genus, you select something for the genus, and then all the species within that genus inherit that trait. What if there could be multiple growth forms within a genus, and then so if you say this genus could have woody or it could have herbaceous, then do all of the species within it also get both of those automatically checked? Or
That's a good question, and I'm not sure. I would have to look into that a little bit more.
okay.
Yeah, you can uncheck the character states for specific species. within the matrix. So if you check a character state for a genus, you can uncheck specific under like children tags.
Okay. And would it go the other way around too? If you check something for a species, then would the genus get that checked as well?
I'm sorry, can you restate that? There was a little bit of interference.
Okay, I was just wondering if it goes the other way as well. Like if you select something for a specific species, then would the genus also have to be marked for that feature?
No, I don't think so, because
Okay.
you know, those traits may differ widely within a genus. Frank, you have a question or comment?
Oh, I have a comment. So basically, part of this is especially problematic if you're working with groups that change the taxonomy a lot. So in license, for example, we very frequently have people put in things in other general, in other family, and so forth. So if you use this tag mark for characters to be inherited a lot in groups, then it might sometimes be rather complicated to characterize the entire matrix. So a good policy is, if you can, is do the checking from the bottom up. Essentially start with the species or the lowest level of category, what you have, subspecies, variety, or whatever it is, and then kind of go upwards. Unless you're really certain that the taxonomy for a certain group won't change anymore, because you might run into a problem where suddenly a genus is split into different ones, and not all of them have the same characters. So then it can become really complex.
Thanks, Frank. Your microphone is a little garbled, so I'm going to repeat a little bit what you said. So Frank was saying that you really have to pay attention to the taxonomy in your portal too, because if you want to make sure that the traits truly are, or the states truly are shared across a taxon, if you're using that parent to child taxon autofill. So it's generally best practice to fill it out species by species, unless you're really darn sure that that particular character state is shared across an entire parent taxon. Another question, is there a way to link available images within the portal to illustrate character states? Wonderful question, Jennifer, and that actually transitions to the next part that we're going to talk about, which is editing the characters and the character states that exist. All right, let me pull Signet back up and share my screen again. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is what someone who has identification keys administrator access can do. So they can create characters and create character states to which, or that the character that belong to the characters. So if I go into the sitemap and I scroll down, there's an option here that says, oh, where did it go? Identification keys. So if you are an identification keys administrator, then you will see you are authorized to access the characters and character states editor. It also says that I'm authorized to edit identification keys. So I am both the an admin and an editor. Notice that there's no like quick link to go to editing the matrix for taxa, because you have to do that from within a checklist. So I have to go to a checklist and then open the matrix and then start coding my character states. But if I want to create characters and character states, then I can go to the sitemap and click characters and character states editor. So this gives me a list of all of the characters, and they can be put within what are called groupings. So that's just kind of a way of tidily putting certain characters together, you know, if they all correspond to one certain part of the body or part of the plant, part of the organism. So this is talking about kind of the whole plant, this is talking about the root system, etc. So if you want to add a new character, then you click the green plus sign over here. If you want to edit an existing character, then you just click on the name of the character. So within here, you'll find 4 tabs, and there's some general details. So this is where you would add the character's name. you would define what grouping is in. And so you can, that's what I was talking about with the, plant versus root system, etc. You can put a link to help URL. So if you have a specific description of how you can determine whether something is a tree versus a shrub, you could put that in the help URL. You can link here to names that are already populated in the glossary, which is really nice because then you can link all of those resources that you put in the glossary also to your identification keys. You can put a description here and you can put any other notes here. If I go into the character states tab, then it will show me a list of all the character states from which people can select to apply a certain character state to a taxon. And again, if you want to add a new character state, you click this plus sign. And if you want to edit an existing character state, then you will click the name of that state. And it looks a lot like the details page from here. Character state details, you add the name, the description, you can also link it to a glossary page, you can add notes, and you can add an illustration too. So you can add a link to a specific picture of that specific character state. So you can't necessarily do it on the character side, but you can do it on the character state side. I don't know why this one's not working quite yet, but we have to fix that. But you could, if I needed to replace this, I could click delete image and then I could put a new one in here. And then if you need to delete the character, then you would evaluate and then delete if there's nothing linked to it. So these are all the character states with all of their information. Your name will automatically be entered in this entered by when you make edits to this, or when you, I think when you first enter it. So going back to the overall character page, if I go into taxonomic linkages, this is really slick because you can apply a character to only show up if specific taxa are present in the checklist. So it doesn't make sense if you had a plant checklist to also have fungi characters come up or mammal characters to come up if you're in a multi-taxon portal. So what you can do is you can assign the taxa to which that character applies. So in this case, if there's any sort of taxon that is in the kingdom Plantae in your checklist, then it will show this particular character. And you can include and exclude using this tool too. So if you had a character that applied to everything in the family except for that one wonky genus, you could say, okay, put it for the whole family, but just exclude this one genus. So you can put the taxon name. And you could say it's relevant to this, or please exclude this in my checklists. Okay, and then the admin is just for deleting the character, which hopefully you won't have to do too many times. Okay, Jennifer, are those images for the illustrations, I assume, are linked from the portal or uploaded from local files in a computer? I don't remember. I think you can do either way. Let's go back to character management and find one that doesn't have an illustration yet. It looks like you have to upload something. But I bet that we could put a link alternatively. If you link it to something in the glossary, then it will also link to that glossary page, which may include any images that you've put on the glossary page too. So that could be a good option. Okay, I had just a couple of notes that I wanted to share with you all about those key points. So again, taxa may be excluded from characters, and taxa may have multiple character states. So you could say that all of the oaks can be woody or shrubs. So like the entire oak family could have woody and shrub or herbaceous if they're herbaceous oaks. Although character states are applied to taxa from a checklist, and this is really important, those character states are automatically applied to the taxon across all checklists. So this could happen where you get into character state wars if two people are working on different checklists and they're like, no, I said that was a shrub. And the other person says, no, I said that was herbaceous. So make sure that the character traits states that you're applying are the same across the range of the taxon. And if they're not, then just do multiple options from those character states. Because I know that does happen in at least plants where maybe they're bigger or smaller in certain regions. So you want to account for that. Again, if you're an administrator, you can edit and add characters. And if you are an editor, you can edit which character states are applied to which taxa.
Katie, can I ask a question about that last slide?
Absolutely.
It might be the case that there are some people on this call who might want to be some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
How do they become those things?
You would contact your portal administrator or portal manager. Like if you have a really vibrant, active community who is working on your portal, like for example, in the Bryophyte and the Lichen portals, I know they have people who are working on the glossaries and the identification keys, then you would contact the leadership there. If you don't know who that is, you can always email the hub and we can put you in contact with the right people. And if you don't know whether there's a community, then just feel free to email the hub. We're at help@symbiota.org, and we can either connect you to the right people or we can grant you those permissions.
Okay, and then I have another question for you.
Yeah.
It seems like for some groups of organisms, there are really good trait databases out there in the world. And obviously, we don't want to recreate the wheel by manually importing all of these data. And so could you just talk a little bit about, like, can you do bulk uploads from existing resources that have great trait tables as long as the names line up?
There's no user interface for doing that right now, but you can have the hub do that on the background or in the back end.
I'm curious how that applies to people on this call. Like, are there people who would like, that has a source of trait data that they would like put into their portal so that the keys function could function better? Does that apply to anybody? And if so, what portal are you from?
I see Stephen is nodding. You're muted though, so.
Mosses.
And where's the trait data coming from in that case?
Generated locally here.
Okay. And so you have that data in a spreadsheet or something?
Yeah, I've got a 1,400 record spreadsheet. Yeah.
Okay.
James says yes for Oregon flora.
And James, tell us what you have and where the data come from for Oregon flora. If you can unmute. Oh, no audio. Okay.
Says, it comes from the Oregon Flora Project.
Yeah.
I think maybe one thing that needs to be emphasized when uploading this kind of stuff is that you need to be really careful not to make a mess in a way if you do this in batch, because I'm dealing with that in the Lichen portal right now. So what has happened traditionally there was a huge project, or it's still actually active in Munich and in Bayreuth, Germany, called LIAS, lichenized and non-lichenized ascomyces. And basically they kind of jumbled together a huge matrix of characters, but they didn't do very good checking. And then especially in fungi, since people are working on lichenized fungi and differently and non-lichenized fungi, they're using different terminology sometimes. So I would strongly recommend that if you upload a character matrix, that you make sure that you don't duplicate characters and stuff. So for example, Cynet has a really good, I understand, character matrix already for vascular plants. So it in a way, if you want to upload additional terms to that matrix and add to that, because in Oregon, maybe those characters are absent or not coded well in that matrix, then you need to make sure that you really coordinate this well with whoever manages the characters in Signet. And so for the Biophyte portal, I'm not quite sure. I'm not really managing that portal, but I know that there's a very good North American Biophyte flora, as I understand. And so maybe you want to make sure that the characters that you upload there are more or less congruent or match the characters in that flora. And I understand that, I think, in Miranda, maybe you can correct me on this, but I think in the Biophyte portal, they currently don't even have that functionality of keys enabled. And so before you get started, really, it really makes sense to think well, because cleaning this up later is going to be a huge amount of work. And I'm struggling really with this in the Lichen portal.
Yeah, it's definitely a community curation effort and should be cooperative.
I'm just starting out and I've got some collaborators, but I'm very sensitive to what you said, Frank, because there are others interested in putting together keys that have standardized character states. And we're just at the beginning stage. So we're nowhere near ready to upload anything.
Jennifer asks, regarding the glossary, did you already cover these in one of the meetings? If so, is there a link for it? No, we have not covered the glossary in a Symbiota support hub or support group meeting as of yet. But great topic for the future. Frank, you know tons about the glossary. You've been curating it a lot in the Lichen portal.
Yes, I can show you how it looks in the Lichen portal, but it's still Ed is working on a couple of implementations to improve it. So for the lichens, for example, I put always the singular and the plural, various different things like whether something has a Latin root term and things like that. And so this is all not available yet. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to share my screen, but I could briefly show you if I am allowed to share the screen, what the Lichen glossary looks like. So sorry, this is bit of a mess, my screen right now, but if you go to the Lichen portal, basically you click on sitemap, and there is here under additional resources something called glossary, and then you can search for a term, and that will narrow down that list. You click on that term, and then a window pops up that shows you how this term is defined. And in this case, it also has a link to another glossary which is outside of it. And there are some images on here. The images, unfortunately, you see you can't magnify them easily. You have to currently open the image in a new tab to see the details. And so there's still quite a lot of things in development that Ed is working on. But just to give you an idea.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, a glossary is another one of those not currently widely used, but could be really powerful tools. Again, because it takes a lot of research and curation, but a lot of that research and curation has already been done by someone. It just hasn't been put in a specific digitized format. There are a couple questions in the chat. Is it possible to customize characters and character states, for example, have a set with a certain terminology that others could use, but that might be controlled by a given group? What I've shown you is pretty much the extent of the control that you can have. You can have administrators and you can have editors. And again, you can have a lot of editors or a few editors, but there's not like a specific set of permissions, like they can only look at certain taxa or certain traits, characters. Carl asks, what is the scope of a checklist? For example, if you attribute particular characters to a particular taxon, what checklists will be impacted? Great question, all of them. So if you apply a character state to a taxon, that is applied to the taxon in all checklists.
All checklists in all portals?
Oh, sorry, no, within a portal.
Okay, I get confused. Sorry for my confusion, but like for Signet, for example, what's the scope of a portal? What counts as one
That's
portal?
also a great question. Yeah, because SciNet is a network of portals, of 12 portals, that is. So if you edit something in the Texas and Oklahoma, or the CERNEC, or the Consortium of Midwest, or the Consortium of the Greater Northern Great Plains, one of those 12, that's also going to be applied to all of those portals. And let me give you a link real quick. So if you're confused about SciNet, it's very confusing. Then you can take a look at that list and see what actually is part of the SciNet portal network.
A nice way to think about that is that a portal shares one taxonomic thesaurus. And when you are doing these traits, you're applying traits to a name in the taxonomic thesaurus. So any collection or front end or database that's referencing that taxonomic thesaurus will be impacted by the traits you add.
Exactly, yeah. Any other questions? I saw Diana had a question about checklists, and Lindsay answered that with our playlist of YouTube videos for creating checklists.
I guess I'm curious if there's anybody here who works in a portal that does not have the keys feature turned on and you want it turned on, because that's something that we can certainly help you with. You can just type in the chat if that applies to you.
All right, well, if there are no other questions,
I do have, can I interrupt with one?
Oh, yeah,
I
please.
waited to the end because I'm a user of the tool and not an administrator of the tool.
Great.
Sometimes a frustrated user of the tool. Can you talk about the behavior as you're working your way down the tree? It's very understandable and predictable. But oftentimes you get to a point in the tree and you want to work your way back up. And at the state of the tool doesn't seem to, it doesn't seem like your path down the tree is symmetric with your path up the tree. That the state of the tool seems, first of all, is it intended to work predictably that way, backing up versus going down?
So I'm not sure if I understand what you mean by going up versus going down. Do you mean like going down in the character editor, or are you saying like applying to a species versus a genus?
No, as a user of the tool, I
see.
I say this is a shrub, and then I describe the leaves, and then I describe the flowers,
Mm-hmm.
and then I feel like I'm at a dead end, and I want to back up the tree a few steps. Is it designed to do that, and does it work predictably or rationally if I do? Or is there a rule that I should, or an explanation that I need to understand?
I see. I imagine, so I think what you're describing, and let me just show it to make sure I understand. But for example, if you go in here and you say, okay, I want a tree and I want alternate leaves and I want, monoecious, but then you want to kind of make your search broader. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I want to back up back up the tree, not literal tree, but this data structure tree. Yeah,
gotcha. I think that would just involve unchecking things.
So you can uncheck things. But one thing I notice is that the state of this character list with the unchecked states, that the selections available to me are different backing out than they are going in, and that makes me wonder whether or not the tool is, if I back out and then try and work my way down again, have I confused the tool, or should I still expect it to behave rationally?
That's a good question, and that could just be a bug. If you could send me an example of like some states that you check and they come one way and then they come the other way, the opposite way around, that shouldn't be the case. I could see
take some screenshots and send them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could see that there being some confusion because when you check some boxes, it will narrow down your search to only the taxa that have that character state coded. And so there might be some kind of erroneous exclusions just because a character state has not been assigned to that taxon. Kind of like what I was saying before about there being, trees, it may or may not be a tree, but if it hasn't been checked as a tree, then it won't show up. So there could be something weird with a combination of a bug and also just some missing data that is throwing some confusion in there.
Okay, thank you.
Carl asks, is there any effort or plan to have a more centralized trait database, maybe populating or populated from the species pages? Not to my knowledge, no. And it probably would depend on the portal and whether characters and character states are a priority to that portal.
Yeah,
But
I
no.
would say like probably every community is kind of dealing with that differently, which is very interesting right now because everybody's talking about the extended specimen and we're adding trait data to all of these taxonomic names. But different communities have sort of been working on it in different ways. And I would say in some aspects, we're seeing the taxonomic community, they've been dealing with traits for a long time because they've been doing, monographs of these various groups. I would say polytaxa is a good example. The polykey worm folks have a whole traits database. And only right now are we trying to fuse that database and what the taxonomists have been doing with the collections community and all of our names. And so you see these interesting fusions, but they're kind of random and haphazard throughout the community of who's doing them. There are some portals in which the traits are very well curated and the trait data lives within their portal. Then there's other communities, and VertNet is probably a great example of that. Like VertNet has great trait data for vertebrates. It's going to become a bigger and bigger issue as all of these projects are generating more trait data for their organisms. And where's the authority? That's sort of a community answered question, and it's unclear.
Any other questions? Oh, awesome. James says, I can confirm there's an oddity in the key. Try, for example, selecting grass-like habit and then check leaf blades present and then uncheck grass-like. The leaf blades trait will continue to apply. I see. So like because it's a child character, I guess, it's still showing up. This child character is still showing up, maybe, even though the parent character is no longer selected.
That happens with different paths through the tree.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. We'll look into that. All right, well, I'm going to stop recording.